Tuffers and Vaughan's Cricket Show.
Yes, welcome to Tuffers and Vaughan. Cricket everywhere you look right now, and we're about to add a mouth-watering England-India Test series into the mix, Phil.
Yeah, can't wait for this one, Ellie. Some great players on the show, two great teams with plenty to prove, and I think this one's going to have a little bit of an edge about it. This series is going to be a cracker.
World T20 and the Ashes hot on the heels of this series, and Michael, this is the start of a potentially career-defining period for some of these players.
Yeah, and you could argue it's probably going to define Joe Root's captaincy reign. 10 Test matches, 5 against India and then 5 against Australia. He's yet to win an Ashes series as captain. It's not going to be easy because he's got a few star names that are not going to be with him over the next few weeks, but it could define Joe's captaincy career the next 10 Test matches. So
it's all things cricket for the next hour. We'd love to hear from you as well. Get in touch at 5Live Sport on social media, or you can email the show via tuffersandvaughan@bbc.co.uk.
Tuffers and Vaughan's Cricket Show
on 5Live.
So thanks for joining us this evening. We'll be hearing from England captain Joe Root shortly. I caught up with him this afternoon. We'll also discuss Ben Stokes' indefinite break from the game. And former Indian Test batsman Deep Dasgupta will join us later in the show for an Indian perspective and why this is such an important series for Virat Kohli's men. Look, I know that you two have been gallivanting all over the country, haven't you, doing commentary for the BBC TV for the 100. But the Olympics, I mean, we heard Aggers at the top, right at the top of the programme. We were all smiling, weren't we, listening to that, commentating on the equestrian 3-day eventing this morning. So what has gripped you at the Olympics?
Well, he's got another gold, hasn't he? Aggers has just called another gold for GB. It's amazing. He's just in the right place at the right time, that fella.
Listen, I've got a gold round my neck as well, Tuffers, because I had Max Whitlock yesterday. So
well, there you
on
go.
my shift.
There you go.
I tell you what I've loved, Ellie. I like waking up in the morning and just seeing sport, live sport. I love it. But I really enjoy watching sports that necessarily I've not been that attracted to. So I love gymnastics when I'm watching it on the television. I honestly think they are the strongest sports people around. I can't understand how they do what they do. But BMX racing.
Yes.
I mean, I've been to the velodrome in Manchester and I've been on that track. And the amount of respect and seeing Kai White celebrating his teammate's goal, Bethany's, running down the kind of side of the track and throwing his bottle on the floor in celebration. Full respect. And BMX biking, I can imagine what's been happening in the bike shops this week. There were so many kids getting, and probably parents actually, wanting a BMX. Good luck trying, by the way.
I had a BMX. I could do all the tricks, yeah.
I thought you had a chopper.
Well, I did have a chopper, but then I went on to a BMX.
Could you do that kind of those 360-degree flips, Tuffers, on your bike?
Well, only when I was falling off. If I hit
only
a tree,
inadvertently.
I'd usually be flipping around a little bit. And is it the 13-year-old skateboarder?
Yes, Sky Brown. So we were talking about the gymnasts today. So today I was watching the Gadarova twins, Jessica and Jennifer, in the gymnastics floor final for Team GB, 16 years old, but then Sky Brown is just 13. Can you imagine that? It's absolutely incredible.
What an experience.
I know.
That is at 13.
To be fair, at 13, I reckon that's the right age to be a skateboarder.
Fearless.
The older you get, you're going to get fearful, aren't you, going on one of those things? Like the BMXs, you're not going to be doing flicks when you're 35, 40, surely.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's going to be interesting for Aggers and for me to get back into the cricket life again. So I've slightly got my head full of pommel horse routines and and floor routines and parallel bars tomorrow. So I'm kind of cricket tonight, gymnastics again tomorrow, cricket then from Wednesday.
Me and Phil have got to get back to used to calling overs rather than balls.
Yes, that's true.
Test matches. It's been a bit chaotic, the 100, with all the different kind of rules and regulations. It's been fantastic, but I'll be totally honest, I can't wait for Wednesday. Test match cricket, as much as the 100's been a real success. I love all formats of the game, but it's like the 100's been a nice starter. The main course is here on Wednesday.
Well, look, let's talk about that, shall we? Because it does start on Wednesday at Trent Bridge. It's England's only Test series before the Ashes is scheduled to begin in December. So there's a huge amount at stake. And of course, you'll hear ball-by-ball commentary with the TMS team, including Aggers, Isha Guha, Alistair Cook, and these two and others as well. There's a daily TMS podcast, TV highlights on BBC Two every night at 7 p.m. and also on iPlayer. Look, we'll discuss the series in depth later in the show, but we're going to hear now from the England captain, Joe Root. I spoke to him earlier about the significance of these next few weeks, concerns over the Ashes and the loss of England's talisman, Ben Stokes.
Yeah, I mean, I had a conversation with Ben. He told me the situation. And more than anything, I just want my friend to be okay. I think as long as I've known Ben, he puts everyone else first. And I think now is an opportunity for him to put himself first. And he has my full support on that. He has the whole team's full support on that. And I just hope everyone respects that and understands that. And he can get himself back to being Ben Stokes again. And that's all anyone wants, really. That's all we all want. I just, more than anything, want my friend to be okay.
It feels that he's one of those people who takes the weight of the world on his shoulders an awful lot of the time. So do you think maybe that's part of it, that it's just, time to step away from all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think more than anything, just, like I say, he needs to put himself first and take that this is an opportunity for him to do that, to be with his family, and give himself the opportunity to feel like the best version of Ben Stokes, because we know from a cricketing point of view how good that is, and from a personal point of view, he's one of the greatest blokes that I've ever played cricket with. So hopefully he can get back to being himself again. How
much will you miss him personally?
Huge amount. As I say, he's one of my closest friends in the game. And he's been the heartbeat of this team for a long time. So, on two levels, as a friend and as a captain, having one of your senior players missing is what it is. But it's, that's nowhere near as important as Ben just being happy within himself.
It's such a crazy schedule coming up. We know the test matches against India, then Bangladesh, Pakistan, T20 World Cup, Ashes. Are you concerned that this is going to be a conversation that we'll be having again in the future, that bubble life, that the pressures of the tour, the tours, the managed environments, whatever you want to call it, is going to take its toll on other players as well?
I think it's important that people keep talking about it, and people are aware of how difficult it can be for players over a sustained period of time. From the outset, we mentioned that I don't think it's a sustainable thing. I think Moles was the first one to come out and say that. And I think it's really important that we keep trying to find ways of looking after all of our players to prevent guys from burning out or from struggling in other areas as well. So more than anything, we've been assured that the mental health and well-being of our players is at the forefront of the thinking from the ECB. And it's really important that we continue to keep talking about it and make sure that they have the best opportunity to look after us.
And there's an ongoing conversation about the Ashes as well, isn't there? The idea that players, understandably, on a long tour want to have their families with them at some point. Where are we up to with that? What can you tell us?
Look, I think, again, that has to stay between the players and the ECB. There's so many moving parts with what's to come. I think one thing that's important to get across, actually, is that as players, you look at an Ashes series, especially away in Australia, and it's the one tour that you want to be involved in. Every single player, as a kid grows up, they want to go to Australia and they want to win the Ashes. They want to lift the urn out there. And that doesn't change just because of the environments that we find ourselves in. We're all desperate to go and do that. It's just to what cost, and what environment we're going to be living in off the back of 18 months of being in these bubbled environments. So there are very important conversations that need to continue to keep happening, and we need to work very closely with the ECB so they can be very aware of where we're at, and they can have good, honest conversations with Cricket Australia. But again, I think for now, that's something that should stay between us and PCA and the ECB.
In the meantime, one of the toughest series that you can face at home starts in 2 days' time against India. Do you feel prepared for that?
Yeah, absolutely. Very much looking forward to it. Regardless of the format, it's always good when guys are coming off the back of playing. So we've got 2 big days of preparation, and we've got to make the most of them and feel as ready as we can going into that game.
Not been much first-class cricket, though, has there, in the last couple of months since the end of the New Zealand series? So is that a worry at all, that players might be a little bit undercooked in red ball cricket?
I think you've got to draw on your experiences as red ball players, and that's part of the challenges of the scheduling, and it has been for a long time now. There's, one of the demands of the modern day player is that you have to be able to flick across formats seamlessly, or as seamlessly as possible. And you have to find ways of managing that. Especially if you want to stay around the international scene for a long period of time. The guys have had to do that throughout their careers till this point, and it's just another opportunity to try and get that balance right.
Do you feel like this is a bit of a career-defining spell for you as well, Joe, as England captain, India, and then the Ashes away?
They're 2 massive series. There's no getting away from that. And as a captain, you want to win those big series, but ultimately you've got to just break it right down. And without being too cliche, you've got to look at what's right in front of you right now. And our biggest challenge as a team is making sure we start well in these 5 matches here at Trent Bridge, and we build forward from there. And hopefully we can get some momentum with some good cricket in this first Test match and carry the series forward.
Do you feel as if you're favourites or are India favourites?
I'm always confident when we're playing at home. I think it's just a very unique place to come and play England compared to a number of different places around the world. So we've got some wonderfully talented players that can exploit these conditions, and hopefully we can do just that.
Well, that was the England captain, Joe Root, and we'll discuss how England can try and win this series without Ben Stokes later in the show. But let's look at his decision to step away from the game indefinitely. And I don't know what you thought, guys. I thought Joe Root sounded... I was quite moved, actually, by the way Joe spoke about Ben Stokes. Yeah. He said, I just want my mate to be okay.
Yeah, and I think that's what it's all about. I mean, first of all, I think we've just got to be grateful that they've got such a good backroom staff. All this is in place. And you've got a captain like Joe Root. As you said, it was quite moving listening to him there. Obviously Ben's having a bit of a tough time at the moment, and that's absolutely fine. You step away, you get out of the frying pan or whatever you want to call it, and just take some time. It's been a very, very strange 18 months, hasn't it, that we've all, encountered it. And more so if you then got to go out and perform at the highest level. I mean, we've been in bubbles commentating and sort of felt the pressures and the strains and what have you of all, let alone when you've got to go out there and deliver on the pitch, playing for your country. And if you're performing at that level all the time with all these things in the background, sometimes you've just got to go and step away and just regroup and come again, which I'm sure he will do. I hope he's absolutely fine. And I hope he does that. And I'm sure, the strength of his character and the person that I know he is, he will come back, fighting fit and ready to go again. But I don't see it as a black mark against your name at all. Listen, back in the day when I was touring, I had a few little wobbles on tours and what have you, and the circumstances were completely different. You would perhaps see it as a black mark against your name, or he's not a good tourist, or he's not this, or he's not that, which I think was wrong. Times have moved on for the better.
That's so interesting to hear you say that, Tuffers. So would you not have been able to speak out about having problems, about struggling mentally?
Well, you would be able to speak out, but it would take a long time for it to happen. Just because you'd be in an environment when you'd see that as perhaps a weakness, or people wouldn't have understood, or they've just said, Phil's not up for the fight, he's not in, he's not part of the team, and all these kind of things. Times were very much different back in those days. I remember I had a little issue in India. It was the first time I'd toured India. Things weren't going well, and the sights and the sounds and the noise and everything and the crowds. You do have these little wobbles, and you go and talk to, in my day, we sort of went off and talked to senior players, and you had a beer and sort of sat down and tried to get through it like that. So these occasions do arise, and you just got to remember, people have been crying out for live sport on the telly and live sport on the radio and what have you, and now crowds are coming back and what have you. That's all very well and good, but these guys, they've been in bubbles for months, without family and things like that. So we kind of do sort of think of our sporting heroes as sort of, having to do these things, and you're getting well paid and you've got to go and do this because we all want to cheer you on and all that kind of stuff. But there are pressures, huge pressures on these guys, and so for my mind, I think Ben's done exactly the right thing. It wouldn't have been taken lightly, and he's just stepped away and said, listen boys, I'm going to have a break, I'm going to get myself together, and I'll see you later on.
Yeah, I think anything that generally occurs in the game, Ellie, you can ask us both a question, and we can go back to experiences when we were playing or touring. I don't think we can in this situation, because we ultimately don't know what these players have really gone through. For 18 months now that they've been locked up. Even when they've been at home, they've not been able to do normal things. It's not that they've been able to go home and just go out for family trips and just be around the public. When they've been in these bubbles that have been semi-relaxed, they can't just nip and switch off from the game. They can't go to the cinema. They can't go into a restaurant. So even in now they go back into quite a strict bubble against India, but in recent times when they played against New Zealand, they were allowed a little bit of relaxation, but it was nothing like what it was before. When Ben Stokes speaks out about mental stresses, it actually hit home with me that we all have to take a bit of a wake-up call, because ultimately we know how tough he is. we know what a cricketer is. He can perform on the stage where the utmost pressure's there. He's delivered many, many times. And for Ben to have done it, I really do think it's a message to a lot of administrators around the world. We'll talk about Australia and the Ashes. That debate will go on for a long, long time, because Australia are strict. Their government aren't suddenly going to release their restrictions and allow everyone in. You're looking at the families of these players, the kind of organisation to get your families into Australia if they're allowed. Do you want your wife and 2 kids to go and sit in a hotel room for 2 weeks without being able to go outside? All these things must be going through the player's mind. So the anxiety level will be all over the place. I really like what Joe said there. He just wants his mate, and that's what. You become mates. You're not cricket mates, you're mates. And I think we all just want Ben back. We want him healthy, fit. However long it takes, it's irrelevant. If it takes a year, it takes a year. If it takes 6 weeks, it takes 6 weeks. But, I do think that over the next few months, if you actually look at this England side of what they are going to do, and I know they've potentially going to be pulling out the Bangladesh tour that's in mid-September, and a few of them will go to the IPL. And you know what? They'll get criticised for going to the IPL because, why don't they take that breather? I won't criticise them because, they've earned the right to go to the IPL. They've earned the right to earn that amount of money. So I don't think we can be critical. And also when I hear people say, they earn a fortune, just get on with it, get on the plane to Australia, it's their jobs. Money doesn't choose mental stresses. It's irrelevant the amount of money you've got. Mental stresses come on because there's something that's not happening in that person's life or in that person's mind, and it doesn't choose to go through this. So I do think over the next few weeks that Australian debate will get hotter. I really do think it's going to be potentially... and again, not many people are like me saying it. I really do feel that the Ashes are under threat.
Can we come back to that in a second, Michael? Because actually, I just want to talk a little bit more about the Stokes situation. But yeah, we will definitely come back to that. Tuffers, what were you thinking?
Yeah, well, just from my experience, it was on an Ashes tour. Where a few things were in my mind, and I went over there. I was all right. You think that you're all right and you're up for it, and you get on the plane and you're sitting there talking to your mates and let's go and do well, and there's all the build up and what have you, and I was right up for it. But it's one of those things that you just don't quite know when or why or how or whatever's going on, if you know what I mean. I didn't explain that very well, but I can remember just sitting in my bedroom in the hotel in Perth and just having a sort of a fog descend in front of my eyes, and you just sit there and you just sort of go and you start having a bit of a tear, and you start thinking about things a little bit too much, over-analysing things, and it all just gets a little bit too much. Now, I'm not quite, sure how I don't know enough about it and things like that, but it was just an overwhelming feeling that I just wanted to sort of break away and get away and just sort of like have some time to myself, because the first test was coming up and all this kind of stuff, and I just didn't feel right for it. So it's a very individual kind of thing.
Yeah, and you're right, and mental health is a very individual thing, and we can't kind of generalise, and we can't really say, of course we can't say what Ben Stokes is going through, we don't know, and Joe Root says, well, we're respecting his privacy.
I agree with Mike though, that you do just have to sort of like, you have to do what's best for you. You have to do what's best for you.
And the fact that, that Ben Stokes, as we say, we can't put ourselves inside his mind, and we wouldn't seek to do that in any way, shape or form. But you just need to kind of factually run through what's happened in his life in the last year. So, the series against Pakistan last August, his father was diagnosed with brain cancer. He flew back to New Zealand. In December, his father passed away. Then he broke his hand in the first match of the IPL in April. And I remember interviewing him. So he was then called up to captain that squad, that makeshift squad that was pulled together because the rest of the squad were having to self-isolate. I mean, it's just a bonkers situation. But I interviewed him before that game. And I said, how's your finger, Ben? And he showed me, he said, got that finger which has been broken for ages. And he held up the other and he said, look, I've got my fingers matched now. So he was putting himself in the firing line, if you like, again, while not fully fit after everything he's gone through as well. And really interesting, Michael Atherton in the Times today, basically saying that, it's the small margins that separate the best. He says, seeking the gains can encourage an unhealthy obsession in training or practice. And when the team talk about Ben Stokes being the most hardworking, the man who's in the nets, the man who obsessively practices, it's you kind of think, well,
but injuries, Ellie. Again, I can't.
They all add up, don't they? I'm trying to say it's the mental pressures.
Yeah, I can't speak for what Ben's going through, but I can generally speak from my experience towards the end of my career when I had the knee problems, and it got so frustrating for me because I couldn't play to the standard that I wanted to. And you imagine the bar for Ben Stokes' standard is so high. And if he can't produce that magic that we know he can, and that finger's really causing him he dropped a catch in the 100 just a few days ago, an easy catch on the... You don't see Ben Stokes drop that. He's probably thinking about that finger. There's a bolt inside that finger, because of the operation. And that'll be something that's been triggering into some kind of negativity in his mind, because it's frustrating. As a high-level sports person like Ben, who is so consistently brilliant, producing magic on a day-to-day basis across all the formats, and for him then not to produce that because he's got a finger injury that's not quite recovered as well as he would have liked, and he's been forced to be captain of the one-day side probably a little bit too. He probably came back because of the kind of character that he is. He probably came back too soon because he thought, I can do anything. I'm Ben Stokes, and I think it's just a great lesson to all of us that we see these sports people that are unbelievable and they produce magic, and you kind of sit back and we have a commentator or we watch and go, wow, how have they done that? But they are human beings. They're not robots. And I think sometimes, as Phil mentioned, for the last 18 months, all the sports stars around the world have basically got us through the pandemic. Because it's been the one thing that we've all looked forward to at home, turning on the telly, watching live football, live rugby. The Olympics has been great. But we kind of just sit back and don't realise that it's a human being, actually. Just a normal person. They're just normal things, but they're just extraordinary at producing skill under a huge amount of pressure. I think the Ben situation just was a big wake-up call for me, and I hope for many, that these sports people are just human. That's all they are.
So let's talk about the Ashes then, because there are conversations going on between the ECB, Cricket Australia, we understand, are talking to the Australian government to try and relax the quarantine rules so that the players can be there with their families, where they'll have charter flights perhaps or whatever. I mean, I kind of get the impression from reading stuff about this, listening to podcasts as well, from our Australian colleagues, and saying that they're saying, look, it might be a little bit unpopular with some people in Australia if quarantine rules are relaxed, bearing in mind how strict they are for other people who've been stranded abroad, Australians living overseas who've not been able to go home. But on the other hand, the Ashes is hugely important to the Australian economy.
Yeah, I mean, you go back a year, there was similar kind of situation for the Indian series. and then the Indian families were got into Australia, so that was all put to bed. I remember one of the test matches was potentially going to be changed from Brisbane at the end because it's not just getting into Australia; it's moving from state to state. It's like five or six different
close the
countries,
borders
isn't it?
down, yeah, all the time.
So I do think there's a lot to happen, Ellie, for the England players to be happy that the Ashes will go ahead. I don't want to see an Ashes, El, when you've got potentially 3 or 4 of the top names pulling out because they've been a part of the T20 World Cup. They've been away too long. It's very hard to get their families in. If the families come in, their wives, girlfriends, partners have to go and be in a hotel room for 2 weeks on their own with kids, not being able to go outside, no exercise. I'm sorry, I just don't think that's right to ask of anybody, particularly young families. And if that's the case, I know of players that won't be going. And if that's the case, we're going to Australia with potentially half a team. I think the Ashes will become a farce. The Ashes for me, it's about England arriving down under with the best team. I find it hard to think that there'll be no supporters there. I think that's unfair straight away, that England won't have any supporters there. Again, I understand this situation, but even an Ashes series with no overseas England fans, I find it hard. And I look at Joe Root, and if you actually look at his captaincy reign, the last time in Australia he had the Ben Stokes situation, no Ben Stokes, because of what happened in Bristol. You then go to 2019, it was all about the World Cup. So he didn't really have the test preparation going into the World Cup. Then it was, right, come on, let's try and win in Australia. We'll give him everything leading into the next Ashes series in Australia. The pandemic hit. And there's been all this rotation, which we haven't agreed with. That's what they've gone for. He's now got 5 test matches to get his team playing right without Ben Stokes, without Chris Woakes to start with, no Jofra Archer. And then he's got all these conversations behind the scenes about travel, Australia, will it go ahead? I completely got why Joe Root wanted to do the test. He did his press conference 2 days before. And I know that caused a bit of a stir around the media. I completely get that. Because he just wants to get that out of the way and just focus on preparing for a test match starting on Wednesday. If you do it the day before, sometimes as a captain, and I had it quite a few times, it just played on your mind a little bit of what you'd said and did you say it in the right fashion, how's it going to be twisted. He's got it out of the way. Whether that carries on for the full series, we'll have to wait and see. But I completely get where Joe Root's at. I really do, and I feel it's almost like the misfortune that he's had as the Test captain, that it's happened once again with all this kind of controversy leading into another Ashes series.
Mike, do you think it could be postponed? Or is that just ridiculous? Do you think it could be...
Well, why not put it back a year? If it is the case, Phil, that you're going to arrive in Australia, no fans, half a team, so you're going to be picking lots of young players potentially who don't have families going, will you go to Australia? Are you willing to just go and be away from home for 3 or 4 months? Don Bess, I did something with him the other day. He said, well, I'm 20. Of course I'll go. I'd love to go to Australia. So they've got one player in Don Bess. He's going to play. but I do think, Phil...
Can you imagine, though, if... sorry, you finish that point and then I'll come back and make the point that I was going to make.
Can you imagine, Phil? The broadcasters pay a huge amount of money for the Ashes, and they pay millions and millions. Do you think the broadcasters are going to be happy if England arrive down under with half a team?
No.
It can't be right. So, look, I have a sneaky feeling that it will all get ironed out, as did the Indian series last year. But as we speak now, the conversations within the England team and the ECB and the PCA are swaying towards, there's a lot of players that are saying, look, until things change, we're not going. And that means half the England team won't be going to Australia.
And especially now off the back of this, what Ben's come out and said as well, there is a little bit more to it than sort of like, come on boys, roll your sleeves up, young
Correct.
man. These things have sort of, that's what they would have said in my day.
On social media, it's the military go away. They should just go. Well, you don't train as a cricketer like the military. When you go into the military, that's what your kind of mindset is, to go away for long periods of time. Yes, you go away for long periods of time to cricket, but generally with your family these days. Yeah,
I think the point I was going to make was actually, if you talk about an economic impact, if England fans can't fly to Australia, there's sort of something like 50,000 England fans I heard somewhere fly out to Australia for the Ashes, and if that can't happen, then that's a pretty big economic impact as well. Well, you would have thought it's extremely unlikely to happen.
Yeah, I think that both boards have got to bend over backwards for both sides. It's as simple as that. We all want to see great Ashes cricket. It is the tour. It is the series, as Joe was saying, where everyone wants to go. I think that they've got to really sit down and not bend the rules or break any rules or anything like that, but they can't just sit there and go, no, that's not happening. You either come or you don't, young man. You know what I mean? They've got to really sit down and try and work out a plan where this can happen.
Yeah, it was interesting to hear Joe say as well that, it's what every young cricketer dreams of. Every young cricketer dreams of the Ashes, men or women. And to actually say, look, I'm not going to go for the sake of my own well-being and my family's well-being. That would be a huge, huge call. So
and that at the end of the day comes first, Ellie.
Yeah,
I know that playing for
100%.
England comes first. You know what I mean? I know it does. And England, and you want to represent your country. All those boys and girls want to represent their countries. They're dying to do it, but it's got to be done the right way. Otherwise, you can have knock-on effects.
So lots more to come on Tuffers and Vaughan. We're going to look in more detail about the England team to play India. We'll get the Indian perspective as well. First test starting at Trent Bridge on Wednesday. TMS will be there, of course, and we'll all be part of the team bringing you the very best coverage on 5 Live Sports Extra and 5 Live as well. Right then, let's look then at this England-India series, which starts on Wednesday. 5 test matches, and they come thick and fast, don't they? It's going to be pretty much back-to-back between this week and the middle of September. And you kind of hinted at this, Michael, as well, and I think you're probably going to agree with what Jonathan Agnew's written on the BBC Sport website. He says the next 6 months are huge for Joe Root as a captain. This week marks the start of a 10-test run that could define his captaincy. You go in cycles as a captain, and it might be that Root is coming towards the end of his. So, what do you say? What do you say to that?
I would say it may not be the end if he wins. I think winning will be crucial. I think these next 5 games against India, he'll need that belief and that confidence back in his test team to win games. Losing against New Zealand, England had a very young team, but New Zealand out-skilled, out-disciplined, and just looked a better test match team. They played test match cricket better than England across those 2 games. This Indian team are very, very good. They're strong. They've got a load of star quality players, and then once again, Joe's going into a test series without, Ben Stokes, Jofra Archer and Chris Woakes. You would argue 3 of the most important players, particularly Ben Stokes because of the balance of the side, and Chris Woakes. They can just balance that team because they're all-rounders, particularly in English conditions, and Chris Woakes. Look, it's not going to be easy. That top 3, Joe at number 4, he's not been in great form. His last 10 innings, he's only averaged 20 in Test match cricket. His best player since 2018, who averages 44 in English conditions, is Ben Stokes. He's not going to be with him. And that top 3 of Burns, Sibley and Crawley, if they stick with those 3, and you think that they will, Phil, they're all under pressure. So you've got a top 3, realistically, that they all know that they'll sleep the next couple of nights knowing that they all need runs to guarantee that they're going to be on that flight to Australia.
Mike, can I ask you a question here? Now, we were talking, Aggers was sort of saying that it could be Joe Root's captaincy and what have you. Now, his batting isn't being called into question here at all or anything. Now, if it doesn't go so well against India because he hasn't got Archer, Stokes and all these guys, if he then does go down to Australia with half a team and then loses against a very strong home side in Australia, well, why should that really... It's not about his captaincy, is it?
No, it's not.
It's not about his batting or his captaincy. It's just like, and then who else would do the job? So
I think, Phil, what Aggers is saying...
Aggers
is an old chap, is Aggers. He's been around the block and he's seen many England captains go through cycles. I was one, Strauss, Nasser, others... And we generally know in English cricket, you get about 5 or 6 years as an England captain. That's been the history. Whether Joe decides he can do a lot longer... but your mind generally just starts to go away from, a young, fit, vibrant Joe Root as a captain for this series without Ben and Chris Woakes and Jofra will be like, come on, lads. You just lose that energy of, wait a minute, I'm going to that well again to try and get myself up for a series without my best players. It'll be his 3rd Ashes, Phil.
Yeah.
And he hasn't won one yet. 3 Ashes series without winning one, even though his team in 19 was World Cup geared in 2000.
Has that got anything? But did that have anything to do with his captaincy?
No, but what I'm saying is once if he does lose 3, in your own mind, you probably go, I just want to be a batter. I just want to wake up now and just bat. Let someone else. Rory Burns, potentially, if he can become a bit consistent at the top of the order. He's captain Surrey. Well, he's a good leader. Look, that's down the line. Let's hope that England win against India and against Australia, and Joe would carry on. But the one thing about captaincy, it starts and finishes. You do come to an end eventually, and over the next 6 to 8 months, it may be that we do see the end of Joe Root as the captain, but it might be the end if he wins. He might just win in Australia and go, you know what, I've done my bit now. I've done 3 Ashes series, I've got the big one away from home, and now I'm going to pass it on to someone else. You just get that moment as a captain, as a leader, and it doesn't seem to me like it is yet, because I watched Joe closely, and I don't think it's close, but he may just wake up in 3 weeks' time and go, you know what, I've had enough. That's what happened to me. I woke up and went, I don't want to do this anymore. I've had enough of being the captain. And that's pretty much how most England captains end. It's pretty sudden.
Yeah. As far as this England lineup is concerned, Phil, with these 10 big test matches coming up, is there any element of the side, so top order, middle order bowlers that you think is 100% settled and you put your mortgage on?
I've got about 8 teams written down here.
Hold on a minute. I hope I haven't got a very big mortgage.
What's your team this week, Phil? What are you going for?
I don't really know. Josh Buttler keeping and batting. He's my banker. He's my mortgage. Joe Root. Listen, as Mike was saying, that top 3 is still very much in the air. They've got to get some consistency there. Jack Leach is England's
play against
number 1.
New Zealand, Phil, without Ben Stokes.
He hasn't played a test match since 2019 Ashes, has he? I don't think.
No.
Do you know what surprised me,
in
Ellie?
this country? Do
you know what surprised me? And I'm not too sure the situation of Moeen Ali, whether he is, in the test kind of thinking or not, because of what happened in India. He played that one game, then he went home. Moeen Ali for me is the second best all-rounder in English test match cricket. You've got Ben Stokes stand out, seam bowling all-rounder. For me, Moeen Ali is then the next best all-rounder. I would have been knocking on Moeen Ali's door, and I'd have been saying, Moeen, can you come and play for us now? Because with Moeen Ali, you could have Josh Buttler at 6, Moeen Ali goes to 7. And then you can have a Sam Curran at 8, Ollie Robinson at 9. And I believe England's real threat to them is their batting, that they just don't get enough runs. Pack your batting, and then you've got Broad and Anderson at 10, 11. That, for me, is quite a solid batting lineup. 5 bowling options. Obviously, Mo's not there this week, so it's not going to be happening. No. But I would have been knocking on Moeen's door and saying, come on, come and help us out here, Mo. You're our second best all-round, and with you at 7, it just pushes Sam Curran and Ollie Robinson down to 8 and 9. As we look now, without Moeen Ali and Leach looking like he's going to play, and he is the number 1 spinner, but times and need and all that. Sam Curran looks like he may bat at 7 and Ollie Robinson 8, and then Broad Anderson.
You're picking Ollie Robinson, are you, Mike?
Yeah, Ollie Robinson.
No Mark Wood. No Mark Wood.
Well, if Mark Wood plays, one of Broad and Anderson doesn't play. And on the fact that there's no Ben Stokes and Chris, I just want my experience this week. When you're desperate for a win, Phil, and you're at Trent Bridge, Broad and Anderson's record at Trent Bridge, you've got to play that senior pair. England need a win.
Yeah, as far as that top 3 are concerned, maybe not for these first 2 test matches, but maybe at Headingley. I mean, maybe you see how Burns, Sibley and Crawley go in the first 2 test matches, but that Hasib Hamid could be in possibly for Headingley if things don't go as well as they could.
Well, he got 100, Ellie, didn't he, in the warm-up game against India in Durham a week or so ago. He's playing as well as I've seen him. I think Haas, when he came into the side, the moving ball always looked a little bit of a threat with his technique. He's ironed that out by going to Notts, working with Peter Moores. He looks like he's technically a better player now. And having him around the group, that's what I said. The Burns, Sibley, Crawley, a couple of nights sleeping, they'll know. They're not daft. They know that they need runs, and they'll know that Hasib sat there waiting to take one of their slots. So it may happen next week, Ellie. It might happen sooner than you think. If Crawley snicks off twice again, or Sibley gets out LBW twice again, Burns is a little bit rock solid. He played nice against New Zealand, so I think he'll have the whole series. But Sibley and Crawley, they'll certainly be looking over the dressing room at Hasib and going, ooh, he could take one of our places. Interesting,
isn't it, to look at his career, because 3 test matches at the age of 19 in India, and then form just kind of went out of the window, really. He averaged 9 in the 2018 series, but as you say, he's started to score some runs again, moved to Notts, which seems to have done him good. So it would be really interesting to see whether he will play a part. Listen, let's bring in somebody who's listening with great interest, I'm sure, to all of this, and that is former Indian Test batsman Deep Dasgupta, who'll be part of the TMS team for this series once he has completed his quarantine, having arrived in the UK. And Deep, we've got a lovely view over your shoulder of what looks like a Heathrow Airport hotel.
Thank you so much. It is actually. This is day 5, so can't wait to get out of this place and get to the ground.
You two have played against each other, haven't you, Deep and Michael?
Yeah. Yes, we have.
Happy
actually.
memories?
Well, you conned me out of that handle ball, didn't you?
Yeah, I was
Con
looking
me,
at this.
Phil.
I was looking at this on YouTube. So let's get
Conned.
your different views. So it's very rare to get out-handled the ball, but you were behind the stumps, weren't you, Deep, on that particular? Was it
True,
in
and listen,
Bengal?
I remember it differently though. I mean, the ball was going to hit the stumps, and obviously Warney was in peak of his form.
It's in the rules.
Listen, it's in the rules. I mean, I didn't do anything
I was
wrong.
helping you out,
did
just
I?
getting on with the game, overrate and all that.
Fair enough. We lost the first day, isn't it, due to rain or something? So yeah, I guess so.
If you look at
Dave, can I ask you about quarantine?
Yeah. mate.
What are you able to do? Is it just that you have to sit in that room, or can you go out?
Go out for 20 minutes every day. So yeah, just go out for 20 minutes and just go for a run or something like that and come back into the room. But you know what? I've experienced this before. This is my fourth quarantine actually. So before the IPL was into quarantine, then before the India-England series back in India, quarantine, and then again the last IPL. So technically this is my fourth quarantine. So I'm kind of a veteran now.
Let's talk about this series, because I mean, obviously the Indian players have been over here for a while, haven't they, since the World Test Championship final back towards the end of June. How do you think, what kind of shape do you think they're in? Because it felt a little bit in that final that they sort of ran out of steam, didn't they, particularly towards the end against New Zealand, and New Zealand having had the advantage of the 2 test matches already in English conditions. But do you feel like India are more prepared now for what they're likely to face over the next few weeks?
Hopefully so. As you rightly mentioned, I thought they were a little undercooked before the World Test Championship finals. Had just come off the IPL, playing a lot of white ball cricket, and it takes a different mindset to start playing red ball and start leaving deliveries outside off stump. And both Tuffers and Vaughan were talking about how disciplined New Zealand sides are generally. So you need to be very, very disciplined against them. I mean, they do the basic 1%ers so well. And that's where they get most of the top sides out. And that's where I think India needs to be a little more disciplined and be a little more tight in their whole approach in test match cricket. Hopefully they're better prepared for the test series. They've been in the country for a while. They've played a side game as well. Someone like Ashwin's played a county game too. So hopefully they're better prepared and generally speaking, India, as far as touring is concerned, really haven't started towards that well. I mean, they take the first test match or so to get into the groove. Hopefully that might not be the issue this time around.
But Dave, on the back of India winning in Australia, they've won the last 2 times. This is India's golden chance to beat England. I mean, the last time they came, they won at Trent Bridge, and you think, this could be India's chance. And then they just kind of, as the series went on, the ball moved around a bit, and I don't say that they threw in the white towel, but it just felt like they gave up a bit when it got quite tough. This Indian team seem a bit different. They seem a little bit more hardened.
Yeah. Absolutely. And if you look at the experience out there's quite a bit of experience. They've toured England before, they've toured Australia before. They know what to expect in these conditions. So from that perspective, I think they're well prepared. They've been in these conditions before. And also that Australia series, I think that changed a lot of, especially the mindset. India had their backs to the wall with everything happening around. But they fought really, really well. But you know what? On paper, and don't get me wrong, but on paper, I think India, as you mentioned rightly, Wani, I think it's a golden opportunity to win a series here in England, which India hasn't done since 2008. But not everything's hunky-dory in the Indian camp either. So that's something that they really need to work on.
Tell us, mate. Tell us. Come on.
Listen, you've been reading and hearing, I'm sure, about things about Virat mentioned about a few things before after the World Test Championship, because there's a new cycle, how he wants the team to play a little differently, be a little more fearless. There's been talk about Pujara and his strike rate, things like that. There have been murmurs. So I hope these are just rumors and, things aren't as they seem from the outside inside the dressing room.
Are you looking forward to... Oh, sorry, Tuffers, go. You go first.
No. How do India view coming to England? And if they could, win the Test series, would that be a huge feather in their cap?
Massive, Tuffers, because England and New Zealand predominantly are these two countries where India really hasn't done well. The last Test series, 2018, the New Zealand as recent as 2019, or rather 2020, in fact, starting of 2020. I mean, these two areas. See, there's a huge difference in how cricketers prepare nowadays. Right, India, when we were growing up or when we were playing, we had issues with pace and bounce, correct? But with bowling machine and the sidearms and everything else, pace and bounce does not matter anymore. It's the ball swinging around, and I think that goes across the table for everyone. If the ball's turning or swinging, most of the batters nowadays, they tend to have a little more problems as compared to, let's say, our generation or Warnie or Tuffers, you would realize. I guess it boils down to how people are practicing. I mean, we would be practicing against bowlers in the nets, but now it's like, okay, 20 minutes of nets, then you go and play against a bowling machine or somebody who's using the sidearm, where pace and bounce does not matter. I mean, there's this guy called Raghu in the Indian side. He bowls at 150. With his sidearm thing. So, as a batter, you're used to it, pace and bounce. But what you're not used to is playing bowlers in the nets. When that red new Duke's ball start moving around, even if it's like 125, 130 k's an hour, that can be quite a handful.
Well, I was going to ask you about that with the Jimmy Anderson, Virat Kohli rivalry, which has gone back a few years now. And looking forward to that resuming in English conditions.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's like the headliner, isn't it? I mean, that's a story within this whole big tour. See, the thing is, obviously, Virat had a great series in 2018. What generally people tend to forget is the number of opportunities that were dropped. I remember distinctly Jennings dropping a few in the slips right through his legs. So, yeah, I mean, end of the day, he didn't get out to Anderson, but to be fair, he did create opportunities, Anderson in the last series. So it's going to be interesting, yeah.
I've got some stats for you to give India
Come on, Mike.
and a little bit of quite a lot of hope, actually. So June and July, Phil, you'll like this. Ellie, you'll like this. Yeah. June and July, since 2018, there's been 9 Test matches and there's been 33 wickets by spinners in the UK, at an average of 43. Since 2018, August, September, there's been 13 Test matches in the UK, 102 wickets to the spinners at an average of 34. With Ashwin and Jadeja, you have to fancy that India. And it's I know you're going to sound surprised, but it's been hot in the UK.
Well, yes,
and
these wickets, not the last week or two, Michael.
No, but these wickets, you look at the wickets in the 100, they're spinning. All the squares are dry. Spinning's going to play a big part, which it has to favour India.
Yeah, can I ask this then? What's the scene with Moeen? I know you both of you were talking about Moeen a while ago, and I completely agree with you, Warnie. I mean, he's a class act. Is he there? Is he not there? Is he available for Test match cricket?
Well, as far as he's not been announced that he's stepped back from Test match cricket. That's why we keep mentioning him, and we all watch his talent and see him bowl and see him bat and see him captain now in the 100. And you kind of go, what's happening with Moeen Ali and Test match cricket? He played that one game in India, that second Test, then went home. That was his decision to go back home. I would have got Moeen back into the squad for this series on the back of Ben Stokes missing out.
Yeah, the one weakness I can see in the Indian side, apart from this, they've got this powerhouse batting unit and great bowlers, is the tail. I mean, they got blown away a little bit, didn't they, that tail deep against New Zealand? Once you get the big guns out, you feel that you've got a chance to get them in amongst them. Shall I give you a stat? I'm hitting you with the stat now after Vaughan did that. So since the start of 2018, the average of England's lower order batters, so from 8 and below, is 13.39, better only than those of South Africa, Sri Lanka, Zimbabwe and Afghanistan in Test cricket. And if you limit this to just the tail, so 9 to 11, so you might be talking Bumrah, Sharma and Shami, India are the worst in the world, those bottom 3.
Yeah. Now, can I add something to that? And what kind of magnifies the problem is that none of the batters in the top 6 can bowl. So you're getting 0 overs from the top 6 batters. So that just magnifies the issue that you just mentioned. And that's a concern. But what might help, if what Warnie is saying is right and there is a bit of spin, then you have 2 spinning all-rounders. Then you can play both Ashwin and Jadeja. Then someone like Ashwin can bat at 8. But if it doesn't turn and you're playing with four seamers, that's where India struggles, because India does not have a seaming all-rounder in the absence of Hardik, who's just starting to bowl again in white ball cricket. There is no seamer who can bat a little bit. I mean, Shardul did a fantastic job with the bat in Australia, but then he's not your certainty as far as seam bowling. If you're picking three seamers, he's not in your top three seamers. Right, so that's where India might be in a better position if the pitch is turning. Then you can play both Ashwin, who can obviously bat. He's got 4 test hundreds, 5 rather, test hundreds. So then you can play Ashwin and Jadeja.
Yeah, I've got a team. I know Mayank Agarwal got hit on the head today, so he's out with a concussion injury. I've got Rohit Sharma, KL Rahul to open. Do you think that would be the case?
Yes, that should be the case, even though KL... it seems that he's a little reluctant now to open. He wants to bat in the middle order. But in the given situation where he's the most experienced opener available, I think he's played 33 out of the 36 Test matches as openers, if I'm not wrong, as an opener. So I think it should be him opening with Rohit.
And then I've got Pujara, Virat, Rihani, Pant, Jadeja at 7, Ashwin at 8, Sharma, Shami, Bumrah. That's the 11 I've got written down.
Right. You know what? Mohammad Siraj is bowling really well. That's what I hear from the Indian camp.
Right.
There were talks of him playing the WTC final as well. It's just that Ishant and his seniority for a big game like the WTC, they went with Ishant. But there's a good chance that Mohammad Siraj might replace Ishant in that playing 11 of yours.
Very good. And he's the one that hit Mayank Agarwal on the head
That's
today,
right.
So he's bowling sharp.
But we've talked about the powerhouse batters at the top, and you've listed them there, Michael. I mean, Virat Kohli hasn't scored a Test century for 2 years now, is it? Nearly 2 years?
Yeah, I think 2018, the day and night Test match against Bangladesh was his last 100 at Eden Gardens. I think that was 2018. So it's been a while. He's got those 70s and 80s. He played this the day and night Test in Australia. He was absolutely brilliant. Got out at late 70s or early 80s. So he's got those 70s and 80s, but he hasn't really converted those into hundreds, which he generally does. And that's been kind of the story with the top 5 with India. I mean, Pujara hasn't got 100 in a while. Ajinkya got 100 in Australia. That was a match-winning 100. But again, that consistency is a bit of a question mark. But yeah, I mean, going back as far as experience is concerned, obviously, yes, they've got it. It's just that those big hundreds, and end of the day, if you look at India in the last 2-3 years, it's not been the bowling that has let India down. It's the top order batting. India hasn't really scored a lot of 300, 350 plus runs. I mean, we keep talking about, yes, you need to pick up 20 wickets, but end of the day, you've got to have some decent amount of score on the board as well. So, I mean, 200, 250 might not win you games.
Are we going to see some short Test matches here, guys? Because it sounds like the bowlers are going to dominate here.
Well, if there's any kind of movement, Ellie, any kind of swing seam through the air, I look at both batting lineups. I think India will have to have learnt from the way they played against New Zealand, where they were kind of just throwing their hands at the ball. You can't play in that fashion in England. The slip cordon will just be waiting, and Anderson and Broad, 80% of their deliveries are going to be on that lens, trying to offer you the drive. So they'll have to play with more discipline. But then you look at England's batting lineup, and as again we saw against New Zealand, what I look at in England, they've got a little bit of something that they could work with, but you're always a little bit kind of watching from behind the curtains that they don't just get bowled out; they get bowled out quickly. Get there if it's going wrong,
get there early.
And as you said, if they come with that kind of game this week, you're right, Elliot. We could be in for a few quite quick games.
Toughest final word to you. How's this going to go over the next few weeks?
Well, just really looking forward to it. As you say, it's always a fantastic series. It's going to be edgy your seat stuff. As Mike was saying, get there early because you just don't know what's going to happen. It's going to be fantastic.
Yeah. And final word to you, Deep, because you're our guest. You're a visitor to this country. We've shut you up in a hotel room at Heathrow. So when you escape, what are you most looking forward to about coming to Trent Bridge?
I mean, just to get out to the ground. Just get to the ground, watch some live cricket. I haven't seen live cricket in a while now.
We've got lots of nice cake up there waiting for you, mate.
If you can survive 7 weeks with myself, Ellie and Tuffy, you've done very well.
And Michael, you're on baking duty this week because I'm coming straight from a hotel in Manchester to a hotel in Nottingham. So
right,
it's down
I'll go
to you.
The shop.
Homemade, please, Waldy.
That's
homemade.
no excuse.
Tuffers and Vaughan's Cricket Show.